Welcome to Tech News Briefing. It's Thursday, August 24th. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. Since the launch of ChatGPT late last year, a flurry of lawsuits have been brought against the makers of generative AI programs. OpenAI, Microsoft, Google, and Meta have all been targeted. And the cases address a range of issues, including copyright and who's responsible if an AI tool makes a mistake. It could be that what is decided in the courts is more important to the economic future of AI than conversations lawmakers are having about regulating the industry. Here to discuss some of the biggest cases is our tech policy reporter, Ryan Tracy. Ryan, there are a lot of cases, but let's start with the ones focused on copyright, because a lot of listeners will have heard about artists, writers, and others being unhappy that their data has been used to train these generative AI systems. So what are some of the most significant cases here?
There's a number of them, and they all could be potentially significant depending on what the rulings are. One of the prominent ones involved Getty Images, which is, a big service that Wall Street Journal and other news organizations used for pictures. They're suing the image generator Stable Diffusion, arguing that the maker of that image generation program basically used a lot of Getty Images archives without permission and without paying for it. And oh, by the way, is potentially a competitor to Getty Images because it can create pictures that some of Getty's customers might use instead.
What's the plaintiff's arguments generally that their copyright was violated?
Their argument is that the makers of these AI systems need to come to artists first and get permission to use artists' works before training AI systems based on them. And the artist should be able to say no, and or the artist should get compensated for that. And that didn't happen as a lot of these major systems were being developed.
And the developers of those systems, what are they arguing?
Well, so there's a concept in copyright law called fair use, and basically says that if you're using someone's work, you don't always need to compensate them. If you're, for example, taking a short video clip from a movie and using just a very small piece of it, you don't need to go to the movie studio and get permission to do that. And there's all sorts of case law about what constitutes fair use. And these tech companies are arguing that this is a fair use of the artist's work. And one of the factors that will be weighed as courts look at this is there a benefit to the public in allowing this kind of data to be used for training?
And what could the impact be if courts rule that these AI systems have violated copyright?
In the most extreme scenario, you could imagine at least a court saying, hey, OpenAI, you've got to delete your model because it was trained on illegal data. There's also efforts that are ongoing where these AI companies are talking to content creators and artists and others and trying to work out some middle ground where the artists can refuse permission if they don't want their works to be used. Maybe there's a way to have some kind of compensation system, although there are challenges with that because if an AI program generates a single image and it was trained on millions of images, what would the creators of each of those images get? A fraction of a cent or something like that. It's not clear in practice how that would work.
Related in some ways to the question of copyright is just this larger question of all of the data that was used to build these generative AI tools. Are there suits that are focused on privacy?
Yes, there are a couple attempts to actually create class action lawsuits against Google and OpenAI, arguing that by scraping massive amounts of data from the internet to train AI systems, these companies ended up violating people's privacy. For example, there's a law in the United States, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, that says, if you're going to collect personal data about someone under the age of 13, you need the parent's permission first. Now, Google and OpenAI say that they are complying with privacy laws, and so we'll see how courts evaluate all this.
Another big issue here is defamation. What if AI mistakenly says something damaging about someone? We actually have talked about that on the show before with a case in Australia, but are there any lawsuits in the US focusing on that right now?
So there's one in Georgia that involves a syndicated radio host named Mark Walters, and his complaint alleges that ChatGPT defamed him. ChatGPT spat out an answer that said that Mr. Walters had been accused of embezzling funds from a nonprofit group, and that's not true. There was no such accusation or lawsuit. OpenAI has responded and argued basically that no one should believe that everything ChatGPT says is true, that by its very nature, AI-generated content is not always going to be factual, and that people should be fact-checking these outputs. And they make some other kind of more esoteric legal arguments too, and the court will have to sift through all that. One thing that's interesting in this particular case with defamation is other websites are shielded from defamation claims generally because of Section 230, which says that if you're hosting someone else's speech, the person liable for that speech is the person doing the post, not the tech company that's hosting the post. And a lot of legal experts say that it's very unlikely Section 230 would apply in the case of ChatGPT or another generative AI system because, of course, they're creating their own text and photos and videos. They're not hosting someone else's.
So far, we've been talking about cases that target the AI tools and the makers of the AI tools. Are there cases that are more focused on the uses of these tools and how other companies may be putting them to use?
Yeah, and not all of these cases have to do with generative AI. That's sort of the new thing, and it's getting a ton of attention. We saw another lawsuit recently that, again, was trying to form a class action against Cigna Corp, which is a health insurance company. And the accusation there was that Cigna was using AI to evaluate insurance claims and was basically instantly rejecting massive amounts of claims using an algorithm without actually doing right by the patients and evaluating the claims individually. The company says that's not true, and that's not how its system actually works. So we'll see how that one plays out as well. But that goes to this question of, if you're using AI in a business decision, what is the fair way to do that, and what might be a legal violation because it's deceiving consumers?
What's the timeline like here? When are we likely to get decisions in any of these cases?
Well, lawsuits obviously take a long time, and we could see some initial rulings in the coming weeks and months, but there will be appeals after that. Some of these lawsuits could end up going all the way to the Supreme Court potentially. So it will take some time, but Congress is slow too, and the executive branch and the White House have limited power despite all the meetings and speeches that they've been giving on AI. So, some of these lawsuits actually could end up being, in the long run, more important than anything Congress is talking about, but may not actually end up passing.
That was our reporter, Ryan Tracy. And that's it for Tech News Briefing. Today's show was produced by Julie Chang with supervising producer Melanie Roy. I'm Zoe Thomas for the Wall Street Journal. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.